My husband kicked me in the ribs while my kids watched and said, "You're nothing." But my lawyer filmed everything and made sure he faced the consequences. That video became the only evidence that mattered when I'd spent 11 years convincing myself his rage was normal. That morning started like any other. I'd burned the eggs, not intentionally, just distracted by packing lunches, signing permission slips, searching for my daughter's missing shoe. The smoke alarm shrieked. My husband stormed into the kitchen, his face that familiar shade of crimson that made my stomach drop. "You can't do anything right," he said, grabbing the pan and hurling it across the room. Hot oil splattered my arm. The kids froze mid-bite, cereal spoons suspended. This wasn't new. They'd learned to become invisible during his explosions. What was new was my phone vibrating in my pocket, my divorce attorney calling for our weekly check-in. I'd hired her 3 months earlier after he'd shoved me so hard I'd cracked a rib, but I kept postponing, terrified of what leaving would mean. How would I afford rent? What if he got custody? What if he was right and I really was useless? I let it go to voicemail. That decision saved my life. He followed me to the bedroom, his footsteps heavy with intention. I tried closing the door, but he kicked it open, the doorknob punching a hole in the drywall. Our daughter started crying downstairs. Our son, 9 years old, tried pulling his father's arm. "Get off her," he screamed, his voice cracking. My husband backhanded him. Then he turned to me. I was cornered between the dresser and the bed. That's when he kicked me, once in the ribs, twice in the stomach. "You're nothing," he said. "You've always been nothing." I curled into myself, gasping for air. Our daughter appeared in the doorway, phone in hand, filming. I didn't know why she'd started recording. Maybe some instinct told her to document the truth we'd all been hiding. Later, my attorney explained she'd stayed on voicemail when I didn't answer. She heard everything. The crashes, the screaming, my gasps, him calling me worthless. She'd immediately contacted the police, providing them with months of documented threats and injuries I'd shared during our consultations. When officers arrived 12 minutes later, they found me bleeding on the bedroom floor. My husband was eating breakfast calmly, acting confused about why they'd been called, but our daughter handed them her phone. The video showed everything: his face, his words, his violence, the kid's terror, my helplessness. He was arrested that afternoon. I got an emergency restraining order by evening. My attorney filed for full custody and submitted evidence I didn't know she'd been compiling: medical records from suspicious falls, photos I'd sent her of bruises I'd blamed on clumsiness, text messages where he'd threatened to kill me if I ever left. The judge granted temporary custody immediately. 3 weeks later, I sat in family court while prosecutors played that video. Watching it felt like drowning. But this time, I wasn't alone underwater. The judge's face tightened with disgust. My husband's attorney tried arguing it was taken out of context. "Context?" the judge interrupted. He kicked his wife while their children watched. What context makes that acceptable? That night, I received an email from my attorney. Subject line: "He's pleading guilty." My hands shook reading the details. 5 years minimum. Mandatory anger management. Supervised visitation only. I cried so hard my daughter climbed into my lap. "We're safe now, right?" she whispered. I wanted to say yes. But the next morning brought something unexpected. An envelope slipped under my apartment door. Inside was a single photograph, me and the kids sleeping, taken through our bedroom window, last night, and a note in his handwriting. "You think a courtroom can stop me?" I called my attorney immediately. She arrived within the hour, her face pale as she examined the envelope. "He's supposed to be in county jail awaiting sentencing," she said. "This doesn't make sense." We filed a police report. The detective assigned to our case was a woman named Officer Brennan who'd seen too many domestic violence cases end badly. She took the evidence seriously. Within hours, she discovered my husband had been released on a technicality. His attorney had found a procedural error in the arrest warrant. He'd walked out of jail at 11:00 p.m. the previous night. "The restraining order means nothing to him," Officer Brennan said bluntly. "You need to leave. Now. Pack essentials only. Don't tell anyone where you're going. Not family, not friends. He'll find you through them." My hands trembled as I threw clothes into garbage bags. My daughter helped her brother pack his favorite toys. They moved with the practiced efficiency of children who'd learned to pack quickly during past midnight escapes to hotels when their father's rage became too dangerous. My attorney arranged for us to stay in a domestic violence shelter across town. The address was confidential. No phones allowed inside. No social media. No contact with the outside world except through the shelter's secure line. We arrived at 3:00 p.m. I'd our entire lives reduced to 4 trash bags and a backpack. The shelter director, Patricia, showed us to a small room with 2 twin beds and a cot. Other women and children filled the hallways. Some had black eyes. Others had broken arms. All had that same haunted look I saw in my own reflection. That first night, I couldn't sleep. Every sound made me jump. Footsteps in the hallway. Doors closing. Children crying. Around 2 a.m., my daughter whispered from her bed, "Mom, do you think he's looking for us right now?" "Probably," I admitted. There was no point lying to her anymore. She'd seen too much. "But he won't find us here." I hoped I was telling the truth. The next morning, Officer Brennan called the shelter's secure line. "We found your husband's truck parked outside your apartment building," she said. "He'd been watching your windows all night. Neighbors reported seeing him take photos. When officers approached, he drove off. We're escalating this to the detective division. This is stalking and violation of a restraining order." But the problem was proving intent. His attorney could argue he was just driving through the neighborhood. that the photos were innocent, that he didn't know we'd moved. Days blurred together in the shelter. We established routines. Breakfast at 7 Mao. The kids attended the shelter's makeshift school. I met with counselors who helped me understand the cycle of abuse I'd been trapped in, how he'd isolated me from friends and family, how he'd controlled our finances so I'd feel dependent, how he'd convinced me his violence was my fault. Other women shared their stories during group sessions. One had been stabbed by her ex-husband. Another had her house burned down. A third had been kidnapped and held for 3 days before escaping. My situation felt both unique and heartbreakingly common. 2 weeks into our shelter stay, my attorney called with news. Your husband violated his restraining order again. He showed up at your daughter's school. The principal recognized him from the photo you'd provided and called police. He was arrested on school property. This time, the judge revoked his bail entirely. He'd be held until sentencing. The relief was overwhelming. I sobbed into Patricia's shoulder while my kids watched cartoons in the common room. We were safe. Finally. Actually safe. But safety came with complications. I had no job. No income. Our apartment lease was in his name, so returning wasn't an option. My parents lived 3 states away and had never believed me about the abuse. They'd always said I was too sensitive, that marriage required compromise. My mother once told me, all men get angry sometimes. You just need to learn not to provoke him. I couldn't go back to that. The shelter could only house us for 30 days. After that, we'd need to find permanent housing. My attorney helped me apply for emergency assistance, food stamps, temporary cash aid, housing vouchers. The applications asked humiliating questions. Why didn't you leave sooner? Why did you stay if it was so bad? Have you considered reconciliation? Each question felt like an accusation, like I'd chosen this life, like I deserved what happened. I found a part-time job at a grocery store stocking shelves during overnight shifts. Patricia agreed to watch the kids while I worked. The pay was minimum wage, but it was something. I'd save every penny toward first and last month's rent. My daughter started having nightmares. She'd wake up screaming that her father was in the room. The shelter counselor said it was PTSD, that she'd need therapy, that recovery would take years. My son stopped talking entirely. He'd sit for hours just staring at walls. When I asked what he was thinking about, he'd shrug. The counselor said he was processing trauma the only way he knew how, by shutting down completely. 3 weeks into our shelter stay, my attorney called with the sentencing date. Next Tuesday. The judge would determine how long my husband would serve. The prosecution was recommending 7 years. His attorney was arguing for probation. I'd need to testify, to explain the impact of his violence, to look him in the eye while describing what he'd done. The thought made me physically ill. But my attorney insisted. Your victim impact statement could make the difference between prison and probation. You need to do this. For your kids. The night before the sentencing hearing, I wrote my statement. I rewrote it 17 times. Each version felt either too emotional or too clinical, too angry or too forgiving. Finally, I just wrote the truth. What our marriage had actually been like. How I'd hidden bruises under long sleeves in summer. How I'd lied to doctors about injuries. How our kids had learned to hide in closets during his rages. How our daughter had developed an eating disorder trying to control something in her chaotic life. How our son had started wetting the bed at age 8. How I'd contemplated suicide twice because I couldn't see any escape. How his violence had stolen 11 years of my life. Tuesday morning arrived cold and gray. Patricia drove me to the courthouse while the kids stayed at the shelter with another counselor. My attorney met me outside, her expression grim. His family is here, she warned. They're going to try intimidating you. Don't engage. His mother had never liked me. She'd spent our entire marriage telling her son he'd married beneath him, that I wasn't educated enough, pretty enough, sophisticated enough. During one Christmas dinner, she'd suggested he find someone better and just keep me around for the kids. My husband had laughed. The courtroom was packed. His parents sat in the front row, his mother wearing a black dress like she was mourning. His 2 brothers flanked them, both glaring at me with open hostility. They'd always covered for him, made excuses, blamed me. Behind them sat my sister. She'd driven 6 hours to support me. We hadn't spoken much since my wedding. She'd tried warning me about his temper during our engagement, but I'd dismissed her concerns as jealousy. Now she squeezed my hand as we sat down. My husband entered in an orange jumpsuit and handcuffs. He'd lost weight. His face was pale and drawn, but his eyes found mine immediately. The hatred there was unmistakable. His attorney whispered something to him and he looked away. The judge entered. We all stood. The prosecution presented their case first. They played the video my daughter had recorded. The courtroom fell silent except for the sounds of violence, his voice saying, "You're nothing." My gasps, our son screaming. When it ended, the judge asked for my victim impact statement. I walked to the witness stand on shaking legs. My attorney had advised me to read from my written statement rather than speaking from memory. But when I looked at my husband, something shifted. I set the papers down and spoke directly to him. "You stole 11 years of my life," I began. My voice cracked, but I kept going. "You convinced me I was worthless, that no one else would want me, that I deserved your violence because I wasn't good enough. You isolated me from everyone who cared about me. You controlled every aspect of my existence. And worst of all, you made our children watch. You taught our daughter that women are meant to be hurt. You taught our son that men solve problems with fists. You broke them just like you broke me." His mother stood up. "That's a lie," she shouted. "My son is a good man. You're just trying to destroy him." The judge banged his gavel. "Ma'am, sit down or you'll be removed." She sat but continued glaring at me with pure venom. I turned back to my husband. I forgive you, I said. Not because you deserve forgiveness, but because I refuse to carry your poison anymore. You don't get to live rent-free in my head. You don't get to control my emotions. You're nothing to me now. Just a cautionary tale I'll tell my kids about the kind of man to avoid. The prosecution rested. His attorney stood for the defense. He painted a picture of a stressed businessman who'd made mistakes, who'd lost his temper under pressure, who loved his family and deserved a second chance. He called character witnesses. My husband's boss testified he was a model employee. His golf buddy said he was a great guy. His mother sobbed about what a wonderful son he was. None of them mentioned the police reports, the hospital visits, the restraining orders, the video of him kicking his wife while their children watched. Then his attorney made a critical error. He called my husband to testify. My attorney had warned this might happen. Let him talk, she'd said. Men like him can't help but reveal themselves. My husband took the stand, looking contrite. He apologized, said he'd been under stress at work, that he'd never meant to hurt anyone, that he loved his family and wanted to make things right. The prosecutor cross-examined him, walked him through each incident of violence, each threat, each injury. My husband made excuses for all of them. She provoked me. She knew I had a temper. She should have left if it was so bad. The prosecutor paused. So you're saying your wife is responsible for you kicking her? My husband's mask slipped. She wouldn't shut up, he snapped. Always nagging, always complaining. I just wanted peace in my own house. The courtroom erupted. The judge banged his gavel repeatedly. The prosecutor smiled. No further questions, Your Honor. The damage was done. My husband's own words had convicted him more effectively than any evidence. The judge called a brief recess. My attorney squeezed my shoulder. That went better than I expected, she whispered. He just showed everyone exactly who he is. After the recess, the judge delivered his sentence. I've reviewed all the evidence, he began. The videos, the medical records, the testimony. This is one of the most disturbing domestic violence cases I've seen in 20 years on the bench. Mr. Peterson, you systematically terrorized your family for over a decade. You injured your wife multiple times. You traumatized your children. And even after arrest, you violated your restraining order to stalk and intimidate your victims. You've shown no genuine remorse. Your testimony today demonstrated you still blame your wife for your own violence. Therefore, I sentence you to 10 years in state prison. No possibility of parole for 7 years. Permanent restraining order. Supervised visitation with your children only if they consent when they turn 18. His mother screamed. His attorney immediately filed notice of appeal. But it was over. My husband's face turned purple with rage. He lunged toward me. Court officers tackled him before he got close. He was dragged from the courtroom shouting threats. You're dead. You hear me? You're dead. The judge ordered him gagged and removed. The courtroom slowly emptied. My sister held me while I cried. Not from sadness. From relief. From the sudden absence of fear I'd carried for so long it had become part of my identity. Outside the courthouse, reporters swarmed us. My attorney had warned this might happen. The case had attracted media attention because of the video. Local news wanted comments. I declined. But my attorney made a brief statement. Today's sentence sends a message that domestic violence has consequences, that victims will be believed, that the cycle of abuse can be broken. As cameras flashed, I felt exposed, vulnerable. My face would be on the evening news. My story spread across social media. But maybe that was okay. Maybe other women trapped in similar situations would see that escape was possible. We returned to the shelter. The kids were waiting anxiously. My daughter asked, "Is he going to jail?" For a long time, I confirmed. Long enough for us to build a new life. She burst into tears. They weren't sad tears. They were release. Years of tension flooding out. My son remained quiet, but his shoulders relaxed. That night at dinner, he spoke for the first time in weeks. "Can we get a dog?" he asked. Just like that. A normal childhood question from a kid who'd been forced to grow up too fast. The next challenge was finding permanent housing. The shelter's 30-day limit was approaching. My attorney helped me apply for Section 8 housing. The wait list was 3 years long. We needed something immediate. I expanded my job search. Applied to everything. Retail. Food service. Cleaning offices. Anything that paid above minimum wage. Finally, a call center hired me. Customer service for an insurance company. Day shift so I could be with the kids at night. The pay was enough to rent a small apartment in a less desirable neighborhood. The apartment was a third-floor walk-up in a building that had seen better days. 2 bedrooms, 1 bathroom, kitchen barely big enough for a table. But it was ours. Our lease. Our walls. Our safety. Moving day felt surreal. We had almost nothing. The shelter provided donated furniture, a couch with worn cushions, 2 beds, a kitchen table with mismatched chairs. My sister drove up with dishes, towels, and cleaning supplies. She helped us unpack. As she left, she hugged me hard. "I'm so proud of you," she whispered. "I should have helped you leave sooner." I told her it wasn't her fault, that I hadn't been ready until I was ready. That first night in our new apartment, we ordered pizza. Sat on the floor, eating from paper plates. My daughter said, "This is the best pizza I've ever had." It wasn't. It was mediocre at best. But it was the first meal we'd eaten without fear, without walking on eggshells, without monitoring someone's mood to avoid triggering an explosion. We watched a movie on my laptop, fell asleep in a pile on the couch. When I woke at 3 a.m. to carry the kids to bed, I realized I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Hope. The call center job was soul-crushing. 8 hours of angry customers yelling about denied claims. But it paid the bills. Barely. After rent, utilities, and groceries, I had maybe $50 left each month. The kids needed new clothes, school supplies. My daughter needed therapy. My son needed therapy. I needed therapy. But insurance didn't cover mental health adequately. The copays alone would bankrupt us. I found a clinic that operated on sliding scale fees. We went weekly. Slowly, painfully, we began healing. 3 months into our new life, my husband's appeal was denied. The conviction stood. He'd serve his full sentence. My attorney called with the news. "You can breathe now," she said. "He can't hurt you anymore." But trauma doesn't work that way. I still jumped at loud noises. Still checked locks multiple times before bed. Still had nightmares where he found us. My daughter developed rituals. She'd check every window before sleeping. My son still barely spoke. The counselor said recovery wasn't linear. That setbacks were normal. That patience was essential. Around this time, his family started a harassment campaign. His mother called my work repeatedly. Claimed I was a kidnapper who'd stolen her grandchildren. My supervisor pulled me aside. "Is there something I should know?" I explained the situation. Showed her the restraining order. She was understanding, but I could see the calculation in her eyes. Domestic violence victims were complicated employees. We brought drama, instability, risk. I worked harder than anyone else to prove I was worth keeping. His brothers found my social media despite me using a fake name. They sent messages calling me a whore, a liar, a manipulative bitch who destroyed their brother's life. They posted my photo in local groups asking people to confront me if they saw me, to tell me what they thought of women who falsely accused good men. The police said it didn't rise to the level of harassment, that I should just block them, but they created new accounts faster than I could block them. I deleted all social media, became a ghost online. 6 months after sentencing, I received a letter. Not from him, from his mother. She wanted visitation with her grandchildren, claimed she had grandparent rights. My attorney reviewed the letter. She might have a case, she admitted. Courts sometimes grant grandparent visitation even when the parent objects. We'd have to fight it. More legal fees, more court dates, more trauma for the kids. I was so tired of fighting. The hearing was scheduled for March. His mother showed up with her own attorney. She claimed she'd always loved the children, that they needed their grandmother, that I was alienating them from their paternal family. My attorney called the kids' therapist to testify. She explained the trauma the children had suffered, how they associated their paternal grandmother with their father's violence, how she'd enabled his behavior by making excuses, how visitation would harm their recovery. The judge ruled in our favor. No visitation. The children's well-being took precedence over grandparent rights. His mother cursed me out in the courthouse hallway, told me I'd rot in hell, that karma would get me. I said nothing, just walked past her. I'd learned that engaging with them only gave them power. Silence was my best weapon. Let them scream into the void. I had more important things to focus on, like my daughter's school play, my son's soccer games, normal childhood moments we'd missed during the years of chaos. 1 year after leaving, I got promoted at work. Supervisor position, better pay, actual benefits. I could afford a 2-bedroom apartment in a safer neighborhood, better schools, a parking spot. Small victories that felt enormous. The kids were improving too. My daughter joined the school choir, started smiling again, made friends. My son still struggled with expressing emotions, but he was talking more. His therapist said he was making progress, that these things took time. I started dating again. Nothing serious, just coffee with a coworker, dinner with a friend of my sister's. It felt strange being seen as attractive, as someone worth pursuing. My husband had convinced me I was unlovable, undesirable, that no one would want damaged goods. But here were men who found me interesting, who laughed at my jokes, who didn't monitor my every move or explode over minor infractions. I wasn't ready for a relationship. Maybe I never would be. But it was nice to remember I was a person outside of being a victim. 2 years in, my daughter asked about her father, not because she missed him, but because she was writing an essay for school about overcoming challenges. "Can I write about what happened?" she asked. I told her she could write about anything she wanted. Her essay won a school-wide contest. She had to read it aloud at an assembly. I sat in the audience sobbing as she described our escape, our time in the shelter, how her mom was her hero. Afterward, other kids approached her. Some shared their own stories of violence at home, of parents who fought, of feeling scared. My daughter had given them permission to speak their truth. My son's healing was quieter. He didn't talk about what happened, but his art told the story. Dark drawings of storms and monsters gradually shifted to brighter images. Houses with gardens, families playing, dogs running. His therapist said art was his language, that we should celebrate these changes. I covered our refrigerator with his drawings, a gallery of his recovery. 3 years after leaving, I enrolled in community college, nursing program. I'd always wanted to be a nurse, but my husband had forbidden it. Said I wasn't smart enough, that I'd fail, that I should focus on being a wife and mother. Now I studied medical terminology while my kids did homework at the kitchen table. We helped each other. My daughter tutored me in math. My son quizzed me with flashcards. We became a team, a unit functioning without fear or violence. The nursing program was intense. Clinical rotations meant 12-hour shifts on top of classes. I'd come home exhausted, feet aching, barely able to keep my eyes open, but I loved it. Learning to start IVs, administering medications, comforting patients. I found purpose in caring for others who were vulnerable. Maybe because I understood what it felt like to be helpless, to need someone to see you and actually help. One night during my ER rotation, a woman came in with injuries she claimed came from falling downstairs. Her boyfriend hovered close, answering questions before she could speak. I recognized every sign, the way she flinched when he moved, the rehearsed explanation, the fear in her eyes. During a moment alone when I was checking her vitals, I slipped her a card for the domestic violence hotline. She looked at it, then at me, her eyes filled with tears. "How did you know?" she whispered. "I just know," I said. "When you're ready, call that number. They'll help you leave safely." She clutched the card like a lifeline. 2 weeks later, she called me at the hospital. She'd left. She was in a shelter. She wanted to thank me. I told her she'd saved herself. I just pointed toward the door. I graduated with honors 2 years later. Got hired at the hospital where I'd been treated for injuries during my marriage. Some of the ER nurses remembered me. They'd suspected abuse, but I'd always denied it. Now I worked alongside them. One nurse, Teresa, pulled me aside during my first week. "I'm glad you got out," she said. "We tried to help, but you weren't ready. I see you helping other women now. You're going to save lives." Her words meant everything. 4 years after leaving, my daughter graduated high school. Valedictorian, full scholarship to college. During her speech, she thanked me for showing her that strength isn't staying in a bad situation. Strength is finding the courage to leave. The auditorium gave a standing ovation. I ugly cried in my seat while my sister held my hand. My son, now 13, rolled his eyes at my tears, but smiled. We'd made it. Against odds, against expectations. We'd built a life. That summer before my daughter left for college, we took a road trip. Just the 3 of us. We'd never had a real vacation during my marriage. He'd controlled all our money, all our time. Every trip had been to visit his family or for his work. Now we drove across the country with no real plan. Stopped at roadside attractions, ate at diners, slept in cheap motels. It was perfect. On the last night sitting around a campfire, my daughter said, "I'm not scared anymore. Of him finding us. Of being like you were. I know what love shouldn't look like. I'll never settle for less than I deserve." My son nodded in agreement. Me neither. If someone hurts me, I'm gone. No second chances. I felt proud and heartbroken simultaneously. Proud they'd learned the lesson. Heartbroken they'd needed to learn it at all. My ex-husband served 5 years before becoming eligible for parole. The parole board held a hearing. I submitted a statement opposing his release. Detailed the ongoing harassment from his family, the therapy my kids still needed, the nightmares I still had. I included testimonies from my daughter and son. My daughter wrote that she was terrified of him being released, that she couldn't focus on school knowing he might be free. My son wrote simply, "He scares me. I don't feel safe if he's out." The parole board denied his petition. He'd serve at least 2 more years before another hearing. During this time, I met someone, a pediatric surgeon at the hospital. Divorced, single dad, kind eyes. We bonded over hospital cafeteria coffee and shared custody schedules. He moved slowly, respected my boundaries, never pressured me. Our first kiss happened in the parking garage after a double shift. It was gentle, patient, everything my first relationship hadn't been. I cried afterward, not from sadness, but from the realization that this was what healthy looked like, what respect felt like, what love should be. I introduced him to my kids 6 months into dating. They were skeptical. My daughter interviewed him like a detective. "What are your intentions with my mom? Why did your marriage end? Have you ever hit anyone?" He answered every question honestly, never got defensive. My son barely acknowledged him at first, just watched from corners, evaluating. But gradually they warmed up. He never tried replacing their father, never overstepped, just showed up consistently, came to school events, helped with homework, fixed things around the apartment, small acts that built trust. My daughter left for college that fall. We moved her into her dorm together, me, my son, and my boyfriend. It felt like a family, not the broken one we'd escaped from, but a chosen family, built on respect and care. As we drove away, my son said, "He's pretty okay." Coming from a 14-year-old, that was high praise. 5 years after leaving, I bought a house. Nothing fancy, small 3-bedroom in the suburbs. But it had a yard, a fence, a front porch, my name on the deed. The kids each got their own room. We painted walls whatever colors they wanted. My daughter came home from college to help. She chose purple for her room even though she'd only be there during breaks. My son chose blue. I chose yellow for my room, sunshine yellow, the color of hope. We adopted a dog from the shelter, a scruffy mutt who'd been abused and now flinched at sudden movements. He fit right in with our family of survivors. My son named him Ranger. He slept in my son's room, providing comfort during nightmares. Animals understand trauma in ways humans sometimes can't. Ranger knew when we needed quiet companionship, when we needed playful distraction. He became our therapy dog without any formal training. My ex-husband was released after 7 years. I got a notification from Victim Services. He'd completed his sentence, was on parole for 3 years. The restraining order remained in effect. He wasn't allowed within 500 feet of us, couldn't contact us directly or through third parties. But knowing he was free brought back the anxiety, the hypervigilance. What if he violated the order? What if he came looking for us? My therapist increased our sessions, reminded me I'd built a safety network, that I wasn't alone anymore, that he'd face immediate arrest if he came near us, that I was stronger now, not the terrified woman who'd cowered in corners. 6 months after his release, he sent the kids letters. They were delivered through his attorney to mine. My attorney advised letting the kids decide if they wanted to read them. My daughter declined immediately. "I don't need his words," she said. "I know who he is." My son asked to read his. The letter was manipulative, full of excuses and blame. "Your mother poisoned you against me. I'm the real victim here. I love you and want a relationship. If you'd just give me a chance, I could explain everything. It wasn't as bad as she made it seem." My son read it once, then tore it into pieces. "That's not my dad," he said. "My dad would take responsibility, would apologize for real. This person is a stranger." I'd never been prouder. 7 years after leaving, my daughter finished college. Psychology degree. She wanted to work with trauma survivors, help them process and heal. My son was thriving in high school, made varsity soccer, had a girlfriend who was kind and smart. I'd been promoted to charge nurse, was considering going back for my master's degree. The man I'd been dating proposed. Simple ceremony, just family and close friends. My kids walked me down the aisle. My daughter gave a toast about resilience, about how families aren't defined by biology, but by choice, by who shows up, who stays, who loves you through the darkness. My ex-husband tried contacting me one final time, through a mutual acquaintance from our old life. He wanted to apologize, to make amends, to see his kids. The acquaintance relayed that he'd completed anger management, been through counseling, found religion, wanted closure. He was living with his brother, working construction, attending AA meetings even though alcohol had never been his problem. He'd lost everything, his career, his reputation, his family, and he wanted me to know he understood now, that he was sorry. I sent back a single message through my attorney. "The closure you seek isn't mine to give. What you did can't be undone with apologies. My children are adults now. If they want contact, that's their choice. But me? I moved on, built a life, found happiness. You're just a bad memory I've learned to carry without letting it destroy me. You taught me what I'd never accept again, what I'd never tolerate. In a twisted way, you made me stronger. But that doesn't mean I forgive you. That doesn't mean you deserve access to the life I built from the ashes of what you destroyed. I hope you find peace, but you won't find it with us." His attorney called mine a week later. My ex-husband had read my message and broken down crying. He'd finally understood the magnitude of what he'd done, the lives he'd ruined, the trauma he'd caused. His attorney said he wouldn't contact us again, that he'd accepted we'd moved on without him. I felt nothing hearing this. No satisfaction, no vindication, just emptiness where he used to occupy space in my head. That was its own kind of freedom. 8 years after leaving, I stood in my backyard during my daughter's graduation party. She'd finished her master's program in clinical psychology. My son had been accepted to his top choice college on a soccer scholarship. I watched them laughing with friends, watched my husband flip burgers on the grill, watched Ranger chase tennis balls. This was the life I'd never imagined possible, the life I'd fought for, bled for, sacrificed for. Someone asked me once if I regretted staying as long as I did, if I wished I'd left sooner. I thought about it carefully before answering. Yes and no. I finally said, yes, because staying cost years of trauma, stole time I could have spent building this life sooner, exposed my children to horrors no kid should witness. But no, because leaving when I did was exactly when I was ready, when I had the resources, the support, the strength. Any sooner and I might have gone back, might not have survived his retaliation. You can't rush someone else's timeline. Every victim leaves when they're ready, not a moment before, not a moment after. My story isn't unique. Millions of women and men live in similar situations, trapped by fear, finances, or family pressure. Some escape, some don't. For those still trapped, I want you to know something. It's not your fault. You're not weak, you're not stupid. Abuse is designed to trap you, to convince you there's no way out. But there is. It's terrifying. It's hard. It might take multiple attempts. You might fail before you succeed, but one day, you'll take that first step, and then another, until you're far enough away to breathe, to heal, to remember who you were before the abuse, to become who you're meant to be. The photograph that had been slipped under my door that morning 8 years ago still haunts me sometimes. That moment of realization that leaving wouldn't immediately mean safety, that the legal system had gaps, that protection orders were just paper. But that photograph also taught me something important, that I was stronger than my fear, that I could face the worst and survive, that I could build a life on the other side of terror. That survival wasn't enough. I deserved to actually live. My daughter now works as a victim advocate, helping women leave abusive situations, providing resources, holding hands during court dates, being the person she wishes had been there for me sooner. She calls me after particularly hard cases. "Mom," she'll say, "I met a woman today who reminded me of you. She's scared. She thinks she can't leave, but she took my card." I told her about us, about how we made it, and I see hope in her eyes. I tell my daughter she's doing important work, that every woman she helps is a life saved, a family protected, a cycle broken. My son studies psychology too, wants to specialize in childhood trauma, to help kids like he was. He volunteers at a youth center working with children from violent homes, teaches them coping skills, shows them healthy relationships are possible. He told me once, "I want kids to know they're not alone, that it's not their fault, that they can heal." He's already helping more people than he realizes. As for me, I wake up every morning in a house with a man who's never raised his voice to me, never raised his hand, who treats me with respect and kindness, who thinks I'm brilliant and capable and worthy, who loves my children like they're his own. We have arguments sometimes. Normal couple disagreements about whose turn it is to do dishes or what movie to watch. And every time I'm amazed that arguments can be resolved with words, with compromise. Without fear or violence or walking on eggshells for days afterward, I still have bad days. Days where loud noises send me spiraling. Days where I check locks obsessively. Days where I'm convinced something terrible is coming. But those days are fewer now, further between. And when they come, I have tools. Therapy, medication, support system, coping strategies. I'm not broken beyond repair. I'm healing. We all are. Healing isn't linear. Some days I'm fine. Others I'm back in that bedroom with his boot in my ribs. But I've learned to ride the waves. To know the bad moments will pass. That I'm safe now. Actually safe. The video my daughter recorded that morning changed everything. It was evidence that couldn't be disputed. Truth that couldn't be denied. Sometimes I watch it. Force myself to confront what I survived. To remember why I left. To honor how far we've come. Other times I can't bear to look. The woman on that video seems like a stranger. Someone I used to be. Someone I'll never be again. Both things are true. I'm that woman and I'm not. I carry her story, but I'm not defined by it. I'm more than what was done to me. We all are. People ask me sometimes how I did it. How I found the strength to leave. To fight. To rebuild. The truth is, I didn't find strength. I found desperation. I found the realization that staying would kill me eventually. Either literally or spiritually. And I found people who believed me. Who helped me. Who stood beside me when I couldn't stand alone. My attorney. Officer Brennan. Patricia at the shelter. My sister. My therapist. The nurses who'd suspected but waited until I was ready. A whole network of people who caught me when I finally fell. I think about the woman who took that first pamphlet from me in the ER. The one I slipped the domestic violence hotline card to. I wonder if she made it out. If she built a new life too. I'll probably never know. But I hope so. I hope she's somewhere safe. Somewhere free. Somewhere she can breathe without fear. That's what I wish for everyone trapped in violence. Not rescue. But the resources and support to rescue themselves when they're ready. If you're reading this and you're trapped, please know you deserve better. You deserve safety. Respect, love without violence, and it exists. I'm living proof. Reach out to a domestic violence hotline, talk to a trusted friend, document the abuse, make a safety plan, save money in secret, and when you're ready, leave. It won't be easy. It'll be the hardest thing you ever do. You'll doubt yourself. You'll be terrified. You might even go back a few times before leaving for good. That's normal. That's okay. Keep trying. Keep fighting. Your life is worth fighting for. My husband kicked me in the ribs while my kids watched and said I was nothing. But I proved him wrong. I'm everything. A survivor. A mother, a nurse, a wife, a woman who refused to die in that bedroom, who chose life even when life seemed impossible. And so are you. You're not nothing. You're everything. And you deserve everything. Safety, peace, love, joy, a life without fear. It's waiting for you on the other side of leaving. I promise you, it's waiting.